Welcome back to Say Nothing, the podcast bringing you an exclusive serialization of this gripping audiobook. Whether you're tuning in for the first time or following along chapter by chapter, settle in, get comfortable, and enjoy the ride. If you can't wait for the next episode, or you'd like to experience Say Nothing in full, you can purchase the complete book right now. Just follow the link in the description. Chapter 5. Quite how long he had been kneeling, he had no idea. All he could be sure of was that his companion was getting more agitated by the minute. He himself had passed through the pain stage of this particular stress position, his legs now numb and the rigidity of his upper body like nothing he had experienced before. It was less an aching sensation and more an outer body experience. He knew how foolish it was to think that he was coping easily. It had probably been only a few hours, but in the hooded darkness, gauging the passing of time was impossible. Pete recalled the recent coverage of sensory deprivation. He remembered reading how the CIA had been using the tactic on enemy combatants for decades, dismissing it as rumors and speculation. Now here he was, in the city of his birth, hooded and left with nothing but the sound of a near-empty room, the only noise a deafening cacophony of thoughts. That this kind of treatment was real and was spreading like a contagion spoke volumes about the pitiful state of humans' treatment of one another. From out of nowhere, there was a change to the silence in the room. The opening of the doorway brought a gust of cold air. The freshness was at first surprising, but the smell made it clear he was detained near the coast. The respite from the stale, stagnant air he had been breathing for so long was welcome, but short-lived. As quickly as it had opened, the door shut and the sound of footsteps filled the room. The feeling in Pete's knees had been invigorated by the gust of fresh air, with it the pain which had since passed into numbness. He waited. The possibilities of what would come next flowed through his head, causing him to become dizzy. His body wavered, a muscular tremor he couldn't control. Still he waited. He felt ashamed that he was overcome with fear. Not knowing what was coming, having no control over the situation, it was only natural. But the longer he waited, the greater that fear became. There was a shuffling sound in the corner. The sentry that couldn't shake the fidgets seemed more restless than ever. Who it was that had entered the room, he had no way of knowing. From the uncomfortable rustling in the corner, he sensed it was someone with a fearsome reputation, one that could strike discomfort even in its allies. Without a word to anyone, this figure had made a bad situation worse. Whatever was coming, Pete wished for it to be sooner rather than later. Instead, all he could feel was the gaze of his unseen captor, patient and controlled. Still the time passed without incident. As he typed, there was nothing in his mind but the letter. Words appeared on the page, but they made little sense. Sentences meant nothing, conveying no hidden meaning or subtext. They just appeared. This was nothing more than an attempt at catharsis, Owen trying to find an outlet for the puzzle of thoughts in his head. He needed a direction or a distraction, something to tide him over for just a short while. Able to break away from the keyboard, Owen pushed his face into his hands. How had everything come down to him? In this moment, he wanted nothing more than to disappear and hide from his responsibilities. Tormented by the ghost of his brother and the message the letter contained, he couldn't help but feel there was now an added burden to deliver. The sole question remaining was whether or not he could go through with it. His mind turned to Sarah, and how the intensity of his love for her had often left him paralyzed by fear. Leaving now, he thought, would solve countless issues. He turned back to the screen. The jumble of words in front of him did nothing but mock. There had been no alleviating the confusion this time, simply the documentation that he was on the brink of losing his mind. He closed the document without saving. There was nothing of any merit that could be salvaged among the mess of words on the screen. In an attempt to distract, he clicked open his emails, finding a message that piqued his anxiety. There had been no expectation of contact. Just 24 hours previously, he received the note of encouragement, and now he had a follow-up. Was this going to be the withdrawal of the support? Was he, like he had so often feared, going to be in it alone? He wavered the cursor over the email for what felt like an eternity before opening. After the delivery of the letter earlier that day, this was the last thing he needed. Like before, the message was short and simple. We should meet, now. It came as a relief to Owen that the news wasn't worse, but the sinister tone filled him with unease. Myriad possibilities had passed through his mind as the cursor hovered nervously before opening, but this was something that he should have known was coming. A meeting was inevitable, and things were moving quickly. It had arrived a couple of hours previously, so he took no time to type a response in the affirmative. It meant he would have to catch the Eurostar to London, but it was common for him to spend time away from home. The joy of being a writer, he once read, was being able to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He was now learning how to interpret it literally and exploiting it to his advantage. As he typed a proposed schedule for the rendezvous, a wave of guilt washed over him. Ever since he was a child, Owen had felt responsible for almost everything that happened around him. There had been periods of counseling to help him overcome the crippling feelings of guilt he experienced, and medication had helped ease the anxiety and the severity of his episodes. It was the thought of openly lying to Sarah that had triggered such an emotional response. He prided himself on his integrity, and deep down he knew that it was this very principle that was causing this instance of duplicity. Still, the guilt burned, and a moment of self-loathing flooded his thoughts. The email reply was ready to send. His eyes closed, and a deep inhalation of breath followed. "It'll be okay," he whispered to himself. "Everything is going to be okay." Eyes clamped shut, he hit send. "Look, I need to go because of work. I'm not just disappearing for the sake of it." The tension between the two of them had rarely reached a level such as this. "I'll be back the following morning. I don't see why it's such a big deal." "You don't see it as a big deal?" Sarah was incredulous. She stood at the sink and glared at her husband. Her emotions were running high, and even the slightest knock to her day was throwing her off course. "I'm 8.5 months pregnant with your child, and you don't see you running off to London as a big deal?" "Sarah, it's not for long. I'll be back before you know it," he said, approaching with equal measures of caution and remorse. "I just need to head back to meet a couple of sources, and then I'll be on the train and home." "Look, can't Eloise come over? She won't mind, surely?" Sarah erupted. "That's not the fucking point, Owen. I'm stuck here while you're running off like there's nothing wrong." "I'm not running anywhere." Before he could even finish, she cut him short. "Just go. I'm not dealing with this now. Sick to death of all of this. Just leave me alone." She flung her hands out in front of her and headed out of the kitchen. Try as he might, there was no way Owen could understand why she had reacted in such a way. He chastised himself for his chauvinism, dismissing the reaction as hormonal. Something else was wrong, but he couldn't ascertain what. There was no way he could cancel the visit to London. If he could only make her understand the situation, perhaps she would see. Almost immediately he dismissed the notion. No, There was no way she would possibly agree with his intentions. It was only for a day he would be gone. He'd have to deal with the recriminations on his return. As he stood alone in the kitchen, determined to make things right with Sarah, he noticed a flashing light on the table. It was Sarah's mobile phone. Having left in such a hurry and in a wave of negativity, she hadn't time to scoop it up. Moving towards the phone and reaching out to pick it up, Owen was shocked by the identity of the caller. He instantly knew that the cause of Sarah's reaction was this surprise contact. Dad home. He placed the phone back down. In the years they'd been together, the time that they'd been married, and now, just weeks before the birth of their first child, never once had Owen met, spoken to, or even heard about Sarah's father. He knew all about the accident that had stripped her of her maternal parent, but he made little effort to pry into her father's whereabouts. Out of respect from his wife, he let things be, aware that if she wanted to discuss the matter, it would be of her own volition. As the ringing ended, Owen inspected the device. That was the third missed call that morning, all from the same number. She clearly had no intention to answer. Owen checked the train schedule online and saw that the train to London was leaving early that afternoon. He wanted to make amends with his wife and ensure she would be okay during his absence. Try as he might, there would be no way to rearrange the meeting that afternoon, but his guilt was drowning him with its severity. Alone, he questioned the cause of breakdown between father and daughter. Almost without hesitation, his mind switched to the relationship between him and his own child. How would it feel about him? The thought of his own child growing to hate him sent a shiver from head to toe. Owen made the decision not to address the calls until he returned. As much as he wanted to sit down and hold his wife, determine the situation, and help identify a resolution, he knew that he had to leave. He would also ensure he returned that night, and that for today, he should not leave Sarah alone. Pulling his own phone from his pocket, he called Eloise and begged for her to keep her company during his absence. "I'll be gone just a few hours," he pleaded. "I just don't want her to be by herself at this stage. If there were any way I could postpone or cancel, I would." "Owen, you don't need to sound so desperate. I'll be over in about an hour." "Thank you, Ellie," he said. "You're the best." Hanging up, he felt a sense of relief. Thank you for listening to this excerpt from Say Nothing, a compelling thriller currently available on Amazon. Follow the link in the description to order your copy today. Please like and review this podcast and recommend to your friends. Don't forget to tune in again and join us for the next chapter.